You're tuned into News Across the Galaxy, where they talk all things LA Galaxy with the NAG boys. Let's start nagging.
Uh-oh. Oh, okay, we're good. Let's keep going. Hopefully. There it goes. Nope.
And that's how you know we're live. Welcome to News Across the Galaxy, where we talk all things LA Galaxy. I'm your host for tonight, Edgar Zuniga. We have a very special episode lined up for you tonight. We are 1 week away from the end of the MLS regular season, and it looks like the top of the West will still be up for grabs. So, decision day in Houston looms large again for LA Galaxy. If LA Galaxy is to make a run to MLS Cup, there are three teams that Galaxy will likely face in MLS Cup: Inter Miami, Columbus Crew, or FC Cincinnati. To give us a perspective from the East, we have three special guests tonight. All the way from Columbus, representing Soccer Speakeasy, writer and reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, it's Brianna McKay. From right down the road, freelance reporter for the Area Sports Network, it's Kenta Hagiwara. And all the way from Miami, representing the Battered Herons podcast, it's Daniel Granada. And making his triumphant comeback, the OTC, it's Spenny. And as always, on the ones and twos, Chewy. Also, hey, Chewy, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. And everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I know you're all excited about the Dodgers and the Mets and the NLCS, but you're here with us tonight. I know that down in Columbus, you're all cheering for the Dodgers, same in Miami, and same down in Cincinnati. So we really appreciate the love for the Blue Crew. But right now, we're talking MLS soccer. Um, hey, everyone, thank you so much. Brianna, care to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm like you said, I'm Brianna McKay. I've been doing for almost a year now. My first game last season was the Eastern Conference semifinals against Orlando. So I've been doing this for almost a year. It's come full circle, and the crew has been nonstop that whole year. So it's been a fun team to cover.
Kenta, you're next, man, because you're right down the road, and we believe hell is real, right?
Yeah, for sure. What a fun rivalry to be a part of and to cover over in Cincinnati and in Columbus. Yeah, just always a joy to cover soccer, and when these teams are doing so well, it's an added joy.
And of course, all the way from Miami, Danny. Danny, you and I have talked before. I've been a guest on your show. Thank you so much for having me on. Now we get to extend the invitation to you. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Daniel Granada, Battered Herons and Battered MLS fans. We do both shows, Battered Herons. If you're interested in talking into Miami, Messi and friends and all that, we do that 4 times a week in English and once in Spanish on Monday nights. And then we do Battered MLS fans on Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock. So if you're ready to talk some football, head over to the Battered Fans Network.
So East right now at the top, it is a dogfight. We've been keeping tabs. Heck, we are. We're MLS sickos over here at NAG. So we've been keeping tabs on everything that's been going on in the East. Personally, I keep tabs on almost every podcast on the East. I'm sure you guys have seen me show up in Atlanta's podcast, Charlotte. You've seen me, Danny. I've been talking to the guys in Wiseman and Columbus. If there's a podcast out there, I'm probably showing up with my little eyes there in the comments. But for all the entire season, we've just been seeing Miami being at the top. There was Cincinnati challenged at one point, and then Columbus is it's still there. But a lot of people in the West want to know how are the standings going to end up. I mean, Miami is already there, right? But what's going to happen right behind Miami? Who's going to finish second and third?
Well, the Crew's already locked up second with their victory. Not not the last one against New England, but against the Philadelphia Union, they secured that because Cincinnati lost that match to Orlando City. So it's going to be second Crew.
And FC Cincinnati aren't going to be moving from third place. So it seems like the top three don't necessarily have
They're
anything to
locked
play
in.
for coming this decision day this weekend. But that's not
So no
necessarily a
nerves.
horrible thing.
So there's no nerves on decision day. Not like us, right? Where we're going to be going to Houston and oh God, it's Houston.
The only thing kind of up in there for the Crew is if it's going to be Charlotte or the New York Red Bulls. They play the Red Bulls, so they kind of can choose if they defeat the Red Bulls, they'll be playing the Red Bulls in the playoffs in the first round. So they kind of control who they're going to compete against.
Okay.
Both of those are undesirable, though.
Now
I
let
know,
me.
but Charlotte, I don't
I,
know. This season,
I,
Charlotte has had the Crew's number. For some reason, there's just been something about Charlotte that the Crew cannot get past. Just like the most they've been able to do is draw at home. It's just something about Charlotte. They look
Charlotte
good
is
against.
that's that one team I fear in the East that nobody talks about is Charlotte. For me,
Yeah,
Oh, I was going to ask you all because I'm familiar with the Charlotte guys, and I know that they're putting a pretty good run right now at the end of the season. But I'm gonna step a little bit ahead here because this is something we're gonna ask you about a dark horse from the East. But let's just get it out of the way real quick. Let's talk about Orlando City. In case anybody has been paying attention, since a 2-2 draw at Charlotte on June 19th, Orlando have 11 wins, one draw, and only three losses, including six wins in their last seven games. Has Orlando crept up into your radars? Have you guys been paying attention to them? Is there any concern regarding them?
they've obviously figured it out because at the beginning of the season, before the season started, I remember a lot of people had them as Supporter Shield favorites. I remember we had Tom Bogart. We had him on the show. He was like, that was his choice. He's like Orlando, and I mean, he might have been saying that to stick it to us because we're in Miami or whatever. But he said Orlando would be the Supporter Shield favorites. And after the first 2 months, they just couldn't figure it out. But like you said, they've been hot recently, and that's another team that what you want to do when you're in a playoff win or go home setting is get hot at the right time, and they're definitely hot at the right time. Um, a lot of people are paying attention to Orlando. I think 4, 5, and 6 are dangerous. Orlando, NYCFC, and Charlotte. I think those are all three dangerous teams that nobody wants to see in the playoffs.
yeah, I
Um,
know. Orlando always puts up a good fight. It's always a good matchup against the Crew in Orlando. I mean, going back to Eastern Conference semifinals, that went into overtime, and then they faced each other in May. That was kind of the Diego Rossi match that he got the better of Orlando. But even when they came into Lore.com recently in September, it was a 4-3 matchup, and Orlando fought until the end. So I don't think Orlando's a team you necessarily want to see. Any team wants to see in the playoffs because, like you said, they're getting hot.
Yeah,
Kenta,
I
If
mean,
we're
FC
if
Cincinnati
we're not
just
gonna
lost to them recently,
go on.
so don't have a ton to talk about in terms of being scared of them. They've had Cincinnati's number this season. Both road teams have won in their fixtures in the regular season, but yeah, they're getting hot. Facundo Torres is arguably the hottest player in the league, maybe outside of like Evander. They've been so good down the stretch. So yeah, I mean it's a scary prospect when a team's getting really hot at the right time.
Spenny,
if
what were
we're
you gonna
not
say?
considering if we're not considering 2, 3 or place in the East, then outside of Orlando, I would say New York City would be a dark horse. The only issue with New York is that they don't have a very good away record. They're very good at home, but they're not very good on the road. They have like 7 losses. I think they've only won 4 games, but they've been in form just like Orlando, and they have either ties or wins over the top 4 teams in the season.
I
I
mean,
don't
in
think they
league
lost to Miami at all. I know they tied one game. I'm not sure if they lost the other one. I know they went heads up with Columbus. So overall, against the playoff teams, New York City FC actually have a good track record against those teams.
I was going to say in
Now,
leagues, New York City, they took them to penalty kicks. they were the team closest to knocking the Crew out.
Yeah.
Now, you all also mentioned Charlotte FC. Uh, I've been privy to watching the culture at Charlotte really grow over the past 2 3 years. My wife is from North Carolina, so I took special interest in what was going on with the with Charlotte FC because I remember when they first their whole expansion came out of nowhere because at the time George Malik was the one who was leading forward a push with North Carolina FC and Raleigh in the Triangle area, and all of a sudden out of nowhere here comes that group from Charlotte FC with Tepper, and uh, they managed to put something really nice together despite the whole issue with the seat licensing that they have at that stadium. But they have a nice little culture growing there, and there's a lot of excitement this year. I remember for the longest time, the Charlotte fans were saying, "Oh, we're just glad to be here. It'd be nice to do something with the team." And now they've been able to put something really good together. They're very difficult to play at home, and at the bank there. Um, what is it about them that really worries you or concerns you? Because like you mentioned, Brianna, they're somebody you got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, first of all, any team that's playing them on the road, if Charlotte's a home team, Charlotte has the advantage because the Crew have been victims to how hard it is to play on that field. They played there back in March, I want to say, and they lost Rudy Camacho and Christian Ramirez for 2 weeks with injuries from that game. And that was Charlotte picked up the win there, and then Charlotte came to lure.com and picked up a draw against the Crew when they were kind of hot. It just looks like I don't know. It's something about Charlotte. The Crew have struggled to get past this team, and they've figured out how to shut down the offense. They've given up one goal to the Crew in 2 games, and we've all seen the Crew can score goals. So the fact that they've been able to hold them to just one goal is impressive.
I think
Kenta?
Charlotte has the best defense
Oh,
in
go
the
ahead.
East. I think they have the best defense in the East. To me, they have the goalkeeper of the year in Kalina.
Yeah.
So, I mean, their attack is where they suffer. So, for me at least, the reason I'm worried about playing against them is their defense is so good. They might keep a clean sheet, and they're just playing the counter, and all they need is one moment of magic, one random handball in the box, and all of a sudden they can squeak out a 1-0 victory. If you're playing against a good defense in a win or go home situation, that's not a team that you want to play against. So Charlotte, to me, is the best defensive team in the East, and that's why I would be most worried about facing them in a win or go home situation.
Now you
Yeah,
mentioned
absolutely. Right.
I was
Sorry.
gonna say you mentioned a clean sheet. Just real quick, something funny that I was made aware of is that due to the fact that Christian Kalina's last name is Kalina, their
Kalina
manager,
sheet.
yeah, the Kalina sheets. I'm sure you heard of them, right? They did that thing where every time the defense gets a clean sheet, a Kalina sheet, they call them Kalina sheets. Everybody in the defense, including the goalkeeper, gets a bottle of wine that they can then either do whatever the heck they want with it. At one point, I think they got like 6 bottles of wine in a row or something. So these guys must have been having some wonderful parties there. But yeah, Kenta, you were gonna add something else to that?
Yeah, I mean, they have one of the best center backs in the league this year in the Malanda as well. You bring in Tim Bream during the summer transfer window. I mean, what kind of luxury is that? And then, I
Oh
had
yeah,
concerns about Swiderski coming in as a DP that was loaned out. How is he going to fit back in? Because I thought they were going to sell him. They didn't, and he's hot right now. I mean, over the last handful of games, he's been incredible for them. He's gotten goals. He's contributed to that attack that has been lacking. So now, if he's going and he's contributing to that attack that's been their weak link, that's a scary team.
yeah.
I
It was
think
an interesting thing. Oh, go on.
I think for them, actually, what's good for them is their lack of difficulty in the schedule leading into the playoffs. They face Chicago, Montreal. You can make a case for they're gonna play DC as their last game, but going back to the defense, they only have 37 goals against, and defense does win championships. But at the same time, in the MLS, if you're not scoring 2 or 3 goals, it's very difficult for you to play like that for 90 minutes and get a result. And then they're not very good on the road, just like New York City. And with this best of three series, there is no ties. So you got to play the full 90 minutes, which is maybe the only advantage that they have playing on the road. That if they can hold the team down to maybe one goal and get to penalties, that might get them through the first, maybe the second round. But I don't see them getting past the Eastern Conference Final against Miami, Columbus, or Cincinnati. Maybe Columbus.
So now that we discussed some of the teams that concern you, what are your expectations in the playoffs? I'm going to begin with Kenta because I know for a while FC Cincinnati was seen as like a team that could steal some of the thunder away from Columbus and maybe Miami, but things haven't been so easy this season, have they?
Yeah, obviously you lose two key center backs to the injury. Matt Miazga being the big name off of Nick Hagland, so you lose depth in the back line. You try to add during the summer window. You tried to sign a deep B9, that doesn't work out, so you end up getting Gioacchini on like a half season loan, and that hasn't necessarily fared the way the club is expected. So now you're in this awkward state where the team is on pretty poor form, all things considered, running going into the playoffs. And so I think fan expectation, especially considering what the expectation was going into the season, is probably the lowest it's been all year. But look, they still have the reigning MVP in Lucio Acosta. They're coached incredibly well still by Pat Noonan. So I think there's still an opportunity for this team to make noise. And in these playoff matches, whether it's at TQL or at in Miami or in Columbus, I think this team still has an opportunity to make the cup final. I'm just not that optimistic of it at this point.
I have a
going into
question
the
for Kenta.
playoffs.
As a Cincinnati fan, I mean, I've watched a few games, mainly their main games against the top teams. Have they put a good stretch of like 5 or 6 games together? Because they have losses against like lower level teams on top of the. I mean, you guys are good against mid level teams, but like against New York, Montreal, Nashville, New England, Charlotte, Chicago, those are some of the losses that I think you wanted to see the team not only win but dominate, right?
Oh, for sure. I think like if you go back early in the season, I want to say like mid-April to like mid-May. That's probably or like even like start of June-ish. That's probably when that team had their best stretch of games. They probably had like a 6 or 7 game winning streak, if I remember correctly, including a win in Columbus for the first time for Hellas Real. So definitely had their like wins that they've needed to against top opponents. It's just not been as consistent in terms of performances. Obviously, the stat from Cincinnati is in 41 matches across all competitions, they've had 41 different lineups. I mean that it's just an
Wow.
absurd stat to have where you have no consistency in the lineup creation, and that affects every aspect of the game. Whether that's defensively, how you build out of the back, how your attacking combinations, everything gets affected when you don't have any consistency. Where I think we're starting to see it, where you're just not getting consistent results because you have no consistency in lineup creation from the start.
You peaked
What
when you
about
beat
over in
Miami 6-1.
That was certainly the biggest win I think for
That was
that
the
team.
peak. And then it went downhill
Yeah.
from there.
That can't be your
I'm,
biggest win. No Messi, no Suarez, no Jordi Alba, no half of Miami.
But they
Still
had to put
6-1 at home.
yeah.
I mean, though, are we really argue? I mean, Miami's still more than them. I mean, they wouldn't have the supporter shield if they weren't more than those players. I mean, you can't win. Like Messi's been out 2 months. You can't win the supporter shield with with Messi being out 2 months if you're only Messi. So I would say that is a big win. No one else has done that against Miami.
Not even close.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I was
That same team beat Columbus 2-1 like a couple weeks after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
uh,
was
no, I was gonna say that one of the most fascinating things about Inter Miami is that there's so much attention being placed on the four big stars, right? That unless you really, really paid attention, you notice that Miami put together a really strong team. This is a point that I made last week when I was a guest on Scarves and Spikes. We were talking about the Eastern teams, and I said you take away those four guys, and Inter Miami is still a very solid competitive team that could challenge for a cup, and that's credit to ownership and to the front office for doing that and listening to Tata and making sure they put in these pieces in place because somebody would say, "Oh, Messi gets hurt. They got Sauce Suarez. Well, what if he gets hurt too? Well, they got the other two guys. Well, what if all of them get hurt? Well, you still have a good team." and
I think it would still be a playoff. I think they would be somewhere in the I don't know 6, 7, 8, 9 range. I don't think that they would be a title contender without the big four, but I do think that they would be a solid playoff team.
They got 11
yeah,
wins without Messi. I mean, it's
I'm,
out of
I'm,
15
I'm glad to
games.
get I'm glad to get into that once we start talking about the Messi for MVP because that's a topic that a lot of people like to bring up that he's not the MVP because they won without him.
So, Brianna, what are your expectations for Columbus Crew? It's been a kind of up and down season. You got that run to League's Cup, and then also what happened with Campeones Cup. What are your expectations for the playoffs?
I mean, I wouldn't call it an up and down season for the Crew. I think they've had a pretty solid season, seeing the fact that they've gone to the final and CONCACAF Champions Cup. They won the League's Cup. It was a penalty kick shootout against Club America. It wasn't like it was any like blowout against them or anything. That was an impressive game up until the end. They went to seven shots each. And the fact that they've had so many games and so many tournaments and such a congested schedule, and they're still securing second in the Eastern Conference is not an easy feat, I'll say. Like, and they've done it with, and obviously Cucho's your big star, but it's been a full team effort. I mean, Wilfred Nancy suspended Cucho for 2 games, and they were able to continue on. They've had time without Cucho. They've had times where Diego Rossi stepping up when it's Christian Ramirez stepping up sometimes. It's just I've been impressed with all the congestion they've been able to maintain a really competitive team and a really healthy team too. That's something that's been overlooked is the fact they've been so healthy. Really, recently is when they've been hit with the injury bug a little with Sean Zawatsky being out and Steven Marrero, but overall they've been doing really good with injuries. And looking at that and looking at their stamina and the fact that they're still going, I have high expectations for them. I have no reason. I mean, like I said, I started with the Eastern Conference semifinals last season. So I have no reason not to have high expectations because they proved that when it's a trophy on a line, they've been performing under Wilfred Nancy.
And then I call attention to a message that our good buddy Danny posted on our MLS chat on Twitter, where he said, "Columbus Crew no longer scares me. I'm not afraid of Columbus Crew," or something like that. Let me paraphrase,
I
Danny.
said that. I said that like a minute or two after we lost to them in League's Cup.
So tell
Yeah.
me, can you elaborate?
I mean, that game, I was shocked because in Miami, I know a lot of the other MLS fans around the league kind of give Tata his flowers, but in Miami, a lot of Miami fans don't like Tata for whatever reason. They say he takes too long to make substitutions. You know, they just don't give him the credit. But that game, I thought he came out with the right formation. They played well in the first 60 minutes. They basically dominated that game. They were winning 2-0 against Columbus. They took too long to make substitutions, which is one of the criticisms of Tata. Understandable. And up until the 60-minute mark, though, I was like, man, we don't have a full squad. We're winning 2-0. We're doing good. I think that if we had a full squad, we can handle Columbus. And I mean, obviously, Columbus won that game. But I left that after that game. I felt confident. I felt confident that with a full, healthy squad with Messi and everybody, we could go ahead and handle Columbus because Columbus is the biggest threat to us in the East. And after that game, even though we lost the game, I felt very confident because I didn't think that Tata would make the same mistakes twice. And you have to give Wilfred Nancy his flowers because he is probably the best coach in the league. So, yeah, that's where that comment came from. After that, I felt really confident that Miami could be Columbus if we ever played them again, which we did in Columbus. And then if we play again, now it's going to be in Miami. So it makes me feel even more confident as long as we're fully healthy. I feel good.
What are your expectations for Inter Miami? I know it's just a question that has been broached on several occasions with you because it's come up and some of the battered MLS fans conversations that we've had. But at this point in the season, what are your expectations for Inter Miami? You think that they're good enough to not just get to the cup but lift the cup?
Yes, 100%. Since Messi's gotten here, I mean, I guess if you want to count the CONCACAF Champions Cup, it would be 3. But games that Messi starts, they've lost 2. And if you want to count the Monterrey game, the CONCACAF champion, 3 games. In the year and a half that he's been here, he's played what, like 30 games now? They've only lost 3 times when he's actually started a game. Like when Messi's out there, he lifts the rest of the team. We can depend on him to give us Messi magic here or there. He's contributing 1.8 goals contributions per game, so you're almost guaranteed 2 goals every time he steps out on the field. Like I feel 100% confident that if Messi's playing and we're healthy, that they should win the cup at the end of the year. Now, obviously, with a winner go home situation, like the example we were talking about earlier with Charlotte just edging out a 1-0 victory, anything like that, anything can happen. Would that be disappointing? Yes, because I feel like this team is good enough that they should be the champions. But I mean, it's understandable every once in a while when something crazy happens. But yes, I do 100%. That's the expectation here. The expectation was to win Leagues Cup, Champions Cup, or MLS Cup. We had to get out of here with we always said 2 trophies for this team to be success. It had to be 2 trophies. Supporter Shield, I guess you can count that as one, and it has to be the MLS Cup.
Does it matter to you who would be the opponent in the MLS Cup for you to stay at 100% confidence? Is there any
No,
team that shakes that
no.
confidence?
The only team that, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the year, and I'm not saying it just because I'm on this show, but the Galaxy. The attack that the Galaxy has, the speed that the Galaxy bring, it worries me because our biggest issue is the fact that Tata likes to play aggressive. We play with the high line, and we constantly get beat on the counter. And Busquets, if you guys didn't know, Busquets is one of our center backs now. He is a center back, and he is not a fast center back. So we're constantly getting beat on the counter, right? So Drake has to stand on his head, and you have to ride Drake to victory often. So that is a worry of mine when we play against a team as dynamic as the Galaxy. I don't worry about LAFC too much. And maybe Seattle, if they manage to somehow do a Seattle thing and just randomly show up there somehow with their defense. But outside of Galaxy and maybe like Seattle, like I said, because of their defense, I think that I'm expecting Miami to be champions this year. And funny note, the final is on my wedding anniversary. So I already told my wife that we're celebrating our 11th year anniversary in Chase Stadium. Hopefully, getting our first star on the kit. So there you go, December 7th. I already have it locked in. I'm telling you, I'm waiting. It has to happen.
Let's not forget that the only reason that Miami beat the LA Galaxy was because they had
But we didn't beat
a
you.
referee who
We
doubles
drew.
as a
We
DJ on the weekends calling the game.
Whoa. They tied
We
Edgar.
drew. We drew. We
I
drew.
will
No,
say,
I'm just saying. I mean that's the only reason why Galaxy. I say the only reason why Miami didn't lose to Galaxy is because of that referee, man. That little scab ref who was a DJ on the
I'm gonna
weekends.
let Brianna jump in, and then I'm gonna let you tell you something real quick about that. Real quick. Go ahead, Brianna.
I'll just say, I'm just look, and I feel like out of everyone, I kind of look at this the most objectively. I'm not inherently a crew fan. I just cover the team, but I will say two of those trophies that you expected Miami to win, the crew did make the final for those 2 trophies. And I mean, you look at the Pachuca match, that game wasn't the crew. That wasn't the crew that everyone's come to know. Everyone knows the circumstances of that Pachuca match of the food poisoning the team had. I just feel like Columbus just hasn't. Wilfred Nancy will never say that he approaches playoff games differently than he does regular season games, but it's very obvious there's just another drive once they know there's elimination up for elimination on the line. There's something they've been able to since MLS Cup last year, just kick it up to a higher gear when they're up for elimination.
The fact that we got home field throughout the playoffs makes me feel a little more confident, just because Miami is much better at home. And that stat that I gave you about Messi only losing 3, he's only lost once at home, and that was a random Wednesday game against Atlanta, which I don't know what the hell happened that day, but so it rarely
Does
happens.
Atlanta have like wins over every team? Because Atlanta got a victory over the Crew. It just Atlanta has pulled out
They just
random
ran.
victories out of nowhere, and it's like obviously it hasn't had that much of an impact. But
No.
yeah, right before All Star, they picked up a 2-0, 2-1 victory over the Crew. The Crew were on the road. I was just like, wow, I did not see that one coming.
So yeah, I'm gonna shake the beehive right now, because just I think it was like maybe a month or so ago, I was on uh, battered MLS fans, and remember what I said, Danny, where I said the entire season we've been hearing about how strong the Eastern Conference is, but I feel like the Western Conference is a lot stronger top to bottom. I mean, with the exception of the Smurfs, right? But even then, you can't sleep on the Smurfs. Uh, but ever since I said that, teams like New York
Orlando.
City,
Oh my God.
Orlando,
Yep.
And Charlotte, they suddenly caught fire. But then again, they're playing teams from the East. So I was wondering if you still feel that the East is stronger than the West.
Yeah, I would put let's see, Miami, Columbus, Cincy, even Orlando, and I guess NYCFC. I would put the top five in the East against the top five in the West.
Oh,
I feel like you guys are the Galaxy, LAFC, Colorado fell off a cliff. The Dynamo are like the Charlotte of the West. Real Salt Lake, I guess. I don't know. It's Seattle. No, yeah, definitely. You guys beat up on San Jose week in and week out. That's how everybody gets their points. Beat up on San Jose, beat up on KC, and pat those stats. I definitely think the East is a tougher.
I mean, the East is beating up on the Revs. Poor Revs. What do you think, Kenta?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, the West is their playoff groups already settled, right? All 9 teams
Yep.
are already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're done.
and
Yeah, it's just a scram. It's like jockeying for position at this point.
okay, because at least in the Eastern Conference, up to 12th place still can make the playoffs, and I think in my eyes that shows there's more competition and it's more competitive across the board. And
with
so if you
37
want to,
points.
Yeah, look, Atlanta's beating up on random good teams because Atlanta could
But
probably
that-
beat up on random West teams if they played them
with
all.
how many
That's
points doesn't
competitive?
really matter, no, right? Because that's against the teams in your same division. So that just means that there's some top level teams, and then there's a lot of non-top level teams sharing points. I view it as the Eastern Conference is more competitive, and therefore I think it's a better conference.
I do think it's really funny that in the Eastern Conference, Toronto, who is technically ahead of Philadelphia and Atlanta, are eliminated from playoff contention, but Atlanta and Philly can still make the playoff.
Because they already played
That's
34 games.
soccer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's just the sport of soccer. I feel like in MLS, but I mean, yeah, sorry, that's just a funny thing that, like I said, there is so many teams still vying for that last one or two spots.
Spot.
So I want to ask all of you, because we kind of talked about it a little bit about the Galaxy, LAFC, and you mentioned some of the other teams in the West. Um, because of the way the league is structured now, we don't play teams from the West and East back and forth as much as it was in the past. A lot of people say that this has kind of dimmed the shine of the supporter shield because you don't have that interconnection as solid as it was before. But from the perspective of East Coast teams, how do you view the Western Conference? And aside from LA Galaxy and LAFC, which teams do you think could make a legitimate run to MLS Cup as a dark horse? We'll start with Brianna.
Um, it was a little while ago when the Crew played Salt Lake, but they did look good against the Crew in Salt Lake. But they were a team that I was impressed with the most with the Western Conference. I really didn't get a chance to properly analyze Seattle when the Crew played Seattle because that was the goalkeeper gets a red card and you have to put in Sean Zawatsky as a goalkeeper. So that wasn't really much of a real matchup to analyze. So just from the experience of playing the Crew, I'll say Real Salt Lake was an impressive team. They held them to a draw, and I was impressed with their style of play.
Kenta.
I try to stay up for these Western Conference games as best as possible. That's not always happening for me, but whenever I can, I try to. I think Houston they have the champion. Obviously, they won the Open Cup last year, so I think they have the kind of that DNA, championship DNA, to be able to make a run in a knockout stage format. I think they top to bottom have the kind of the roster to be able to do that. Seattle I think they've been the best defensive team on paper, at least, despite their attacking output being rather lacking for the season. But sometimes that's all you need, where you take it to pens and win in pens. So I think those two for me are the teams that kind of scare me. But also, like a Colorado with some of the top in talent that they have in their roster that could certainly carry their roster through the playoffs.
What about you, Danny?
Seattle, just their history. I feel like I don't know. Just you hear Seattle, you just expect them to somehow figure their way out to the at least semis or conference finals. Their defense is scary. Like I told you, that whenever you play against a good defense, that's what worries me in a win or go home situation. And then Real Salt Lake, I don't know when Chicho Arango was hot. I think they worried me a little more. He's cooled off a little bit. But Seattle would be the team that I think would worry me, and I think it's a team that nobody talks about either. No, nobody's talking about Seattle. Everybody's talking about the Galaxy and LAFC, and that's it. I feel like Seattle should get a little more respect.
Let me
Oh,
let you in on a secret. We just don't like to talk about Seattle because they are
yeah.
Seattle.
So
so
we're
We'll
aware
see.
of Seattle.
so
Well,
yeah,
listen,
we
We're,
we are very aware of Seattle, and that would be the easy answer to give. Just because you expect them to be there,
right,
it's one of
right.
those teams that you just expect to be there. To consider it a dark horse is I would think it's a little offensive to their fans just because I, as an LA fan, always expect them to be there. Even if they're in bad form, they just turn it on so quick and so easy that even though they didn't make the playoffs either last year or the year before, you still expect them to be there the following year because the squad, the core, only got better. I'm actually on the same sentiment as Kenta. If it's not Seattle for obvious reasons, it has to be Houston just because they're in form. And in the West, they have the best track record. They have the best way record right now in the bottom of the table, which is kind of what a dark horse is, right? Somebody that can
Yep.
go into a top team's home and take one of those three best of three series games, or take one of the one off games. So Houston for us in LA, if you guys aren't aware, they're definitely our dark horse. They're gonna end our season either on a high note or make it difficult for the LA Galaxy to advance in the playoffs with home field advantage. I don't know if you guys are aware, but decision day against Houston hasn't favored us very well, either at home or away. I've suffered
How
not
often do you
going
guys
to
have
the
to play with
playoffs at
them?
home. Excuse me?
for some
How
reason,
often?
Don Garber.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Don Garber always schedules LA Galaxy versus Houston, like at the end of the season or like near the end of the season, and more often than not, it's a headache for LA Galaxy. Even in years when they're won cups, like Galaxy will have had, the playoffs already settled, and then they go to Houston and they get smashed. It's like, oh, okay,
And it's
um,
always a day game. It's
yeah.
always a day game. Even when it's in Houston, it's a 5:30 game. The year that we went to Houston, I believe it was a 5:30 game, and I didn't understand why. Like just getting off the bus, it was like instantly hot, and it was like 7 p.m. the night before. And when it was in LA, I think in 2000, I want to say 17 or 18, the game was like at 2:30 or 1:30, which was weird because it was a weekend game. I think a Saturday game, and it was that early, which is another like I don't know why. In LA, you should want to put it at 7:30, and we arrived late to everything, so you should want to make it later in the evening.
I
I
will
do want
tell
to
you.
ask.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Brianna.
I do want to ask about. No one's mentioned Minnesota, and they do have Kelvin Yeboah. And since they've gotten him, they've impressed me. I want to like. I don't know how much the Western Conference is worried about him. I know the Crew played Minnesota really early in the season. It was 1-1 draw. I just wanted to ask your thoughts on Minnesota because I feel like if you want to talk about an actual dark horse, they would be the darkest horse coming out of nowhere. Not nowhere,
Yeah.
but they could. I feel like they could do something.
Can you imagine if the last thing you hear before you die is that sound of the loon screaming? I mean, that'd be kind of terrifying, right? Or something like that, right? But before I answer that question, let me mention a super chat. Thank you, Adam, so much for the $5 super chat. Adam asked, and this is for you, Kenta. Who is the best player besides Lucho Acosta on MC Cincinnati?
It's got to be Luca Oriano. I do wonder still to this day what his best position is. He's played at the 10 as a dual 10 alongside Lucho, and he's played at both wingback positions. He's so talented, but I think part of it's that he's still kind of raw. He's young. I think he's like 24. First year in the league, coming on a season long loan with I think an obligation to. Uh, but yeah, he's been so integral as a replacement for Alvaro Barriel, who remember he was an MLS Best 11 guy last year. So for him to come into the league and make an All Star team in his first year, uh, replacing an all-star talent, that's just massive. And he's easily been the best player outside of Lucho, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's wild that you guys lost such a talent and then you replaced him with somebody that could probably be better. That was a big time get.
A big upgrade. So the question was about Minnesota. Minnesota is a team that started off pretty good. I remember like we Galaxy played them early in the season, and we had the guys on from the Lunacy podcast, and they were talking about how they had some pretty good expectations for the team. Um, since Galaxy played them, they've kind of fallen apart. They had some issues with one of their DPs, um, who went down to Argentina, never came back. And then when he finally did, they found out that he was involved with some real shady characters down there. Some videos of him swinging some guns around, and so
Oh
he
yeah.
really like got like he really put his team in a very difficult situation to the point where like they just said, you know what, you could go back home. We don't need you. And so they were kind of in limbo for a while. And it seems that they kind of started figuring things out again. If you're like you said, if you're talking about like a really dark horse, if somebody who like nobody's really paying attention to, it would be
Portland.
a Minnesota United, because a lot of people kind of like counted them out, and all of a sudden you see them kind of creeping up there, and that's why I'm telling you it'd be a terrifying thing to hear that loon screaming in your ear right as you're getting stabbed in the back or something.
I don't believe him. I just don't
Tell
believe
us
him.
why, Penny.
They haven't the last few months. I mean, yeah, they started off strong with one of the best number tens that was in the league. Whether you're a fan or not, Reynoso was something to watch, especially at home. But these last like 2 or 3 months of the season, they haven't been able to beat Salt Lake, Seattle, LA Galaxy, or LAFC. And if we're confident in the West that those four teams are gonna be there as one of the finalists in the Western Conference, Minnesota doesn't have any impressive, not even ties against these teams. I think maybe they tied Real Salt Lake, but I watched I think maybe the first half and it wasn't very impressive on the road. So I'm just not worried about Minnesota with their form right now. And defense does with championships, but they don't really have anything that makes you wonder like, oh, this guy is just waiting to take over the game. They don't have that guy. And if we look at any of the teams on this podcast right now, you have a guy. In some cases, you have two guys. I don't think you can pinpoint anybody in Minnesota that you're like, okay, this guy's gonna just we're just waiting for him to ball out right now. And you kind of need those moments in the playoffs. You do need moments from role players, but you need that guy that you can count on, that you're expecting, like Chris said, where you're expecting Messi to score 1.8 goals. You're expecting Puig to come in and get an assist, or Peck to score an assist. You're waiting for Chucho just to come off the wing and just roll through one or two players and either slide it to Rossi or just bang it in himself. And Cincinnati, you have the reigning MVP. The guy's the smallest guy on the field, so if you can't notice him moving from sideline to sideline, you're just not even paying attention to the game. Who is that in Minnesota?
Your
Exactly.
boa.
Nah.
Oh yeah,
Robin Lod?
there's one thing I need to mention real quick. We just got an update for you. Vancouver Whitecaps just tied the game against LAFC, which to us we're obviously score watching at this point because it's gonna decide who gets the top spot in the West. And let me mention those Vancouver Whitecaps because that's one team that's been you want to talk about up and down season. They were up, they were down, they were up, they were down. They won the Canadian Championship, and it's one team that it seems like they're on the brink of something good, something really significant, especially for their fans, because they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. It seems like they have something that they're brewing, and then they take a loss and they lose ugly in some game. And so for them, if they're able to take some points away from LAFC and even defeat LAFC and they take that into the playoffs, that's one team that I would be wary of, especially because they're pretty difficult to play at home. I know that Miami played them over there. Messi didn't show up. It was a really big deal. A lot of fans bought tickets and they traveled from all over Canada to see Leo Messi, and then he didn't show up. And the team, the front office, and everybody did as much as possible to try to make the best of it. In the end, Miami won. So,
What was
but it's one thing you got to be careful of is the
vouchers?
Vancouver Whitecaps.
They gave like food vouchers or something. Like it was like free food for the fans, right?
Yeah, they were doing everything possible to like make everybody feel good about coming. But our good friend Nathan Durek, he covers Vancouver Whitecaps and for Terminal FC podcast, and he was telling us how instead of focusing on, oh hey look, Miami's coming to town and here comes Messi, the team started to market more as like, hey, let's embrace our team. This is the team that represents us, represents Canada, and that let's make it a celebration of the 50 years of this team. And it was largely successful, but then they lost, right? And so, like I was saying, it's one of the things that the Whitecaps do often. Especially, I remember in the past when they played LA Galaxy, they had some really good teams in the past, and then they just happened to run into some teams from LA Galaxy that were making a run to the cup, and so it took some of that thunder away from them. But it's one team that I would never say, oh yeah, I'm going to completely ignore the Vancouver Whitecaps because they get hot and they have a really good home field advantage up at BC Place. You never know what to expect from them. What do you think,
Can I
Spenny?
say?
Oh,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just gonna say to the point that Messi didn't go to Vancouver. For anybody, whether it be LA or everybody that's listening to this podcast, this is just a suggestion to you. I've seen the prices to watch Messi enter away stadiums, and I promise you, if you go ahead and take that same money, buy a ticket, and you fly down here to South Florida, you can get that same amount of money, spend a night or two here in South Florida. Tickets to get into the stadium in Chase Stadium, which Chase Stadium is a pretty small stadium. Wherever you sit, you're gonna get a good view, and the tickets are going for like 80, 90, $100, and those are pretty good seats that I'm talking about. So I promise you that instead of spending $400 or $500 to go see them over there, get yourself a round trip ticket, get yourself a night or two a hotel here, and I promise you, make a mini vacation out of it. And I don't understand why anybody would spend that much money to go watch them in nosebleed sections in Vancouver or Chicago or anywhere like that.
Chicago is the worst.
Yeah, come over here. I promise you, it's a lot better to come over here.
Real quick, our good friend of the show, Sammy, wants to know about the New York Jets belt. And you mentioned earlier, right? You lived in New York before, right?
Yes, I'm from Brooklyn. I am a displaced New Yorker. So my teams from my youth, the Yankees, the Jets, I still am fans of those teams. But Inter Miami came into existence while I was down here, so I'm riding with Miami.
Okay. As far as Vancouver is concerned, I actually I went I went up to Vancouver earlier in the season. It was part of the away Galaxies contingent, and I love Vancouver. It's my I went back there in 2019 with my wife to celebrate an anniversary, and then I went back there again this year. And it's a beautiful city. It's a great destination. I highly encourage anybody who's an MLS fan if you want to go in and enjoy Canada, Vancouver is one of the most beautiful destinations you can go to. One of the best destinations in MLS. The stadium is beautiful. The city is amazing. Very walkable. There's a lot to do. But I digress. Let's get back to the MLS talk. Um, I know we hit on this topic before we came on, but what do you feel was the most impactful victory of the season for your clubs that gave you a sense of the identity of your team? I'll start with Kenta.
I think I briefly mentioned it, but it has to be the 6-1 win against Miami. It was without Messi, without Suarez, without Alba. Obviously, those are big misses for Miami. But you talk about a packed TQL Stadium against a team that FC Cincinnati has some bitter memories of from last year at the Open Cup semifinals when they lost in pens 3-3 at home. For them to have that big of a statement win against the best team in MLS based just in multiple ways right now. That was, I think, the biggest win for the team.
Okay, Brianna.
If if we're talking specifically regular season, it has to be the LAFC victory in LA. In LA, they 5-1. It wasn't even close. It was I kind of call it the Christian Ramirez game because he was like 30 minutes from his hometown and he scored 2 goals and it was just kind of a full circle moment for him. You just saw he used to play for LAFC. You just saw his improvement and saw the impact that he can have for this team. You obviously always think of the front line. It's Cujo and Diego Rossi, but I think the I think Christian Ramirez is kind of the unsung hero of that front line as well. Like he just brings a different spark, and you saw that against LAFC, and you saw that they can be a team on the road. The Crew last season, their biggest problem was they couldn't win on the road until obviously the playoffs, and beating LAFC on the road, I think kind of solidified like they got over that hump of not being able to win on the road, and it was a very impressive victory.
And Danny, yours?
Beating Columbus. Pick one. Whether it be the summer when they
Oh,
beat them without Messi or Suarez, or beating them with Messi and Suarez in Columbus to clinch the supporter shield. Both of those, I don't know which one was better. I guess probably the summer one, because I felt like that's when everybody's like, oh, okay, so this team is more than just Messi and Suarez. But beating Columbus in Columbus after we lost to them in the League's Cup, I think that was a big statement also, because up until that game, Messi returned. He played 4 or 3 games. They won the first one and they drew the next 2 or 3. I'm a little, but I know that everybody was questioning, like, oh, okay, they were playing really good without Messi. Did he just mess up the chemistry? And then, oh my God, it was this nonsensical talk for the last 2 weeks. And then they went in, and I put money on the game, because with all the rhetoric about, oh, this team might be better without Messi, I knew that Messi would come out and have some Messi magic. And I think that might have been that. So either the one in the summer over Columbus, or the one that just happened a week or 2 ago against Columbus. But regardless, Columbus.
If you want my opinion, I think the second one was actually more impressive. I was more impressed with Miami, and obviously they had Messi, but
Right.
Messi barely had opportunities in that game, and Wilfred Nancy said it best. He had 1.5 opportunities, scored 2 goals, and they were able to throw off the Crew at lower.com field. Playing at lower.com field, I think a lot of people have seen teams struggle, and it was, you talk about all the Miami matches selling for so much. I was the most shocked with the fact that you couldn't tell the Miami crowd at lower.com field. It was fully a Crew crowd. It was coming right after Club America too, where Club America made themselves known. Like you could feel Club America's presence. You couldn't feel like Miami fan presence, and they were still able to overcome it. And they threw Columbus off their game. They got Rudy Camacho to get a red card and forced them to play with 10 men. And look, I think the last few minutes of the game, or the last half, like maybe 20 minutes, the fact that the Crew didn't allow Miami to score with 10 men, that was impressive. But I still think I was impressed with Miami, because I really thought the Crew was going to be able to find one more opportunity, and they just kept them from doing so.
I wanted to ask all of you another question as well regarding your clubs, because you were talking about the most impactful victories of the season. But if a team like LA Galaxy were to face your team in MLS Cup final, what would it take for your team to lose? Like, how could LA Galaxy break down your team, and how could your team end up losing? What would it take to break down your teams, essentially? Let's start with Danny.
I mean, Tata is over aggression. He's way too aggressive. And like I said, if we still have Busquets playing at center back, and Toto Aviles is always getting suspended, so let's say hypothetically it's somebody else back there with Busquets, we don't have the transitional speed to get back on defense, and that's where we get burnt often. So with the attack, with Pooch, with Peck, with all these guys that you guys have in the attack, that worries me a bit. But like I said, I feel pretty confident that Miami should still figure out a way to get the victory. But that would be the weakness right there. Playing the counter, because we like to play possession. We like to play out of the back. We like to play a high line, and it bites us in the butt often. But that's how we play, and that's how we get beat often.
Okay, Kenta.
Very similar note with the inconsistencies with the FC Cincinnati backline, with the injuries and everything. I don't know how well that backline could defend Dejan Joveljic and then Josef Painso and the Gabriel Peck. Like that front three with Puig playing behind. I'm not sure how well. It seems like a matchup between FC Cincinnati and LA Galaxy would just be a massive shootout of goals.
Let's not forget Marco Reus too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's there. He's just kind of chilling right now. They put him on they kind of sat him down, rested him a bit because he had some hamstring tightness, but he should be good to go by now. I think they're resting him for the playoffs.
He's unlocking Pooch.
What's that?
He's been unlocking Pooch. Pooch has space to roam when
Oh
Russo
my
was like,
goodness.
"Oh,
Yeah, you
you
have
don't
no
think so?"
idea, man. No,
I,
it's one thing that's definitely that we noticed. That I mean, one of the concerns, one of the things that we talked a lot about on News Across the Galaxy was about Ricky Puig. We were kind of critical about him because we felt like he tried to play hero ball too much. He tried to be the man. He mentioned he wanted to be league MVP, and one of the things that we noticed was he put a lot of pressure on himself. So he tried to create things from the back to the front, try to be a box to box player, and a lot of times he would make mental mistakes. Obviously, when you look at the highlight package, you only see the really good stuff. But us having to watch the game for 90 minutes, we would see things and we would poke holes in some of the things we would do in this game. But since Marco Roche came on board, it seems that he has more of a sense of calm, and he doesn't feel like he has to try to do everything. And with him and Roche spreading the ball around, it seems like everybody's coming to the table to eat. Um, but transferring the question over to Brianna, uh, what would it take to be a Columbus Crew team? Columbus seems like one of the more solid teams in MLS, and we've seen them be like the boogie team for LAFC. What would it take to beat Columbus Crew?
I think the biggest thing the Galaxy can do is secure second in overall in the league in regular season. I think that first and foremost, if you guys secure home field over the Crew, that'll be a huge deal because I don't. It's very hard to see this Crew team if they are able to beat Miami on the road in the conference final or FC Cincinnati at home in the semifinal. Like if they built up that momentum and LA Galaxy has to go into lower.com field, I think it's to be very difficult for any team having to go in there. But if LA Galaxy forces the Crew to have to travel cross country, especially if after they come from Miami, they have to go to LA, I think that would be a huge advantage. But if we're to talk inside the game, shut down everyone around Cucho. I mean, Cucho is such a hard player to shut down, and Cucho is going to find an opportunity. He wills himself to find opportunities. But if there's only so many goals in a final, you're going to let Cucho score, and you have to take advantage of the opportunities the defense has. The defense doesn't slip up too much, but there are moments where Rudy Camacho or Steven Barrera have little slip ups, and if Galaxy is able to take advantage of that early in the game too, put the Crew behind first. Don't let the Crew get the first upper hand early, and if you shut down Diego Rossi and shut down Christian Ramirez, there's only so much Cucho will be able to do on his own. And even Patrick Schulte has those moments of just miscues. And if they're able to take advantage of the one or two defensive miscues that the Crew might have in a game, that'll be the biggest worry. That would be the biggest worry for the Crew, and that would be the Galaxy's biggest leg up. But like I said, first handle business in the regular season because if you can force the Crew to go to LA, that'll be a huge advantage.
Spenny. So that last game against Houston is large and even is looming even larger now, and that we get that message. Um, Spenny, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What do you think was the biggest victory for LA Galaxy this season, and what do you think it will take to break down an LA Galaxy team against some of those teams from the East?
So to answer your first question, it's not so much because of what team I want to mention, but the positioning that they were in as far as points, and it's the last game against LAFC. Has nothing to do with it being LAFC, but they had two games in hand at the time, and if they would have won that game at Dignity Health Sports Park, we wouldn't be in the conversation of hosting an MLS Cup. With that win, they would have solidified the number one spot, and we would be jockeying for, well, not even jockeying for second or third, but we'd be solidified in second. So that hands down is the most important win of the season. And again, I'm going to say it again, not because it was against LAFC, but because they had two games in hand. And had we lost that game or even tied, we would not be in first place right now. Your second question, can you repeat it? Or it
Oh,
would be to break
what?
down one of the teams?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no,
So
it's yeah,
honestly,
yeah. Well, how would
yeah.
it break down? How could you break down LA Galaxy? Because we've seen it ourselves, but and if you were to tell Danny, Kenta, and Brianna, like, hey, this is what it would take for you guys as to break down our club. Obviously, you guys haven't been watching them like we have here on the West. So, what would it take to break down the LA Galaxy team? that has so many tools, especially up top.
So my concern has been the games against Portland and what Colorado was doing. Vanny, when he gets out coached, it's bad. It's not like small details that he adjusts. When he's getting out coached, it's noticeable and it's bad. And Portland and Colorado followed a game plan where they, instead of kind of marking zones, they were just marking lanes. So there was no passes out wide and there was no attack down the middle, but they couldn't keep that pressure up for 90 minutes. And the only team that I think can keep that up in the East is Columbus. And I would love to see LA Galaxy versus Columbus, two of the original squads. I think Columbus is the most complete team from top to bottom. I think Chucho is the best forward in the league right now. Defensively, they have attacking wings that can run up and down for 90 plus minutes. We've seen it with their depth, with their depth over so many games that they're playing. I don't want it to be Miami just because I don't want that stigma that somebody like Messi can bring his friends and take over the league. I think it would be best for the league if you do see a Columbus versus LA, and it would take that a team that can defensively be sound and keep up with the attack for 90 plus minutes. And sorry to Kenta and everybody know how, or Cincinnati, but I think Cincinnati are pretenders in the top three of the East. I think they're what Austin was a couple years ago in the West. They're fun to watch. Acosta's fun to watch, but I don't think they have what you need to beat the LA Galaxy in a playoff game, especially if it's at the Digs right now. The LA Galaxy are undefeated at the Dignity Health Sports Park.
So we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon, but before we get going, a couple things. First, we're gonna address the super chat from Adam. Adam, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. Uh, all of you, your picks for goalkeeper and coach of the year.
If you
We'll
want, I'll
start
start.
with Danny. Go ahead, Danny.
Kalina from Charlotte and Tata, just because everybody thought that once Messi and Suarez were gone for Copa America, that there was absolutely no shot that they would keep winning or win Supporter Shield, and I think that summer run won him the Coach of the Year.
Kenta.
Kalina, equally here for goalkeeper, and I have Wilfried Nancy as my coach of the year. I think what he's done with the schedule that the Columbus Crew have had, how congested that's been, and the consistency in performances and getting the best out of every player. I mean, that's what you want from a coach, and he's been the best in the league this year, hands down.
And Brianna, what do you think?
Actually, goalkeeper. I'm still kind of debating, but I'm kind of leaning towards Matt Freese from New York City. I'm always impressed every time I see him play. There hasn't been a performance I haven't been impressed. I think a big reason why the Crew was able to beat New York in Leagues Cup is because he went down with an injury really early. I don't know if they pick up that Leagues Cup victory if Matt Freese doesn't get knocked out of that game like in the first 15, 20 minutes, and then I can't find a coach I would put over Wilfred Nancy. I mean, kind of like Kenta said, what he's been able to do. I feel like look at this most recent win against New England. He did it with 4-0 without his two starting goalkeepers who usually plays, Cujo and Mo Farsi. You have Alex Monton, who under Caleb Porter was basically done in the league, and he brought Alex Monton back and he's scoring a hat trick. And granted, New England's not the best team, but he did that with what most people would consider like their BC squad. Is they were able to pick up a 4-0 victory, and he just the way he coaches, the way he believes in his players, kind of every player buys into it. There, you had a moment with AZ Jackson. He pulled him off after 8 minutes and then had him in the starting lineup the next game. What other coaches are doing that? And AZ Jackson had the first assist of the goal of the game, and it's just he's able to bring the best out of these players. And I understand there's more to coaching than that, but I think that's such a big part of why the Crew is so successful, because every player on that roster has a reason to be there, and he's able to bring out the best in there.
What about you, Spenny? What do you have to say?
I'm kind of leaning towards the Charlotte goalie, but I think he's not spectacular. I don't think it's somebody that you look at like, oh, that's a great goalkeeper. But Houston has gotten a lot of help from Clark in some key games, and even though us as LA fans, we look forward to the Houston game. I don't think you go into Houston thinking that their defense is great and their goalie is great, and for them to have such a low goal differential or goals against, I think speaks volumes more to the goalie than the defense. The times I've seen them play, their defense kind of seems lost. And again, maybe he doesn't have as many saves per game, but I think he's a solid goalkeeper. And if it's not the guy from Charlotte, I would think it'd be the guy from Houston. As far as coaches, I have to agree. As far as with the schedule of the Columbus Crew, to keep that team focused and be able to rotate players and hold your players accountable, it's a big like a big example of your leadership in front of your squad. To be in that many finals and be consistent speaks more, I think, to the coaching to keep your team focused and the players' skill. The only reason I wouldn't say Greg Vanny, even though I mean the biggest turnaround I think in the league has been the LA Galaxy from last year to this year,
That was
is because
Miami.
when he gets out coach, it's pretty bad, and you have to kind of give credit to the speed that he got coming in. And if anybody out there is considering Greg Vanny, I would say you have to equally give as much credit to Kuntz for putting this team together than Vanny just kind of putting everybody in the same spot. We haven't really seen a rotation or anything out of the ordinary. It's what you expect, Peck on one side, Paintsville on the other. There's been really no rotation except maybe with John the Rock Nelson being, the shining light coming off the bench. But that's a Kuntz pickup more than, Greg Vanny putting him in that position.
Okay. Um,
Just real quick,
couple more
the
questions.
biggest turnaround was Miami. They ended up below Galaxy last year, and they are supportership champions this year. Just putting it out there. Just putting it
But
out there.
they did win a cup last year, though, right?
Didn't
Yeah.
they? Who did they pick up? They picked up someone in mid-season last year, though,
Yeah, I
who was
wonder
pretty.
who.
Guy
I
just
think
won a
they,
World Cup and Ballon
I
d'Or.
don't know if there was
I'm
another
just
person.
saying. I'm just saying. You said
I'm
biggest
not. He's a
turnaround.
great coach. I'm not
Just going with the
getting anything
facts.
against
Just
him. I'm just joking.
the facts.
All right, folks. A couple more questions before we head out. Real quick. Yes or no? Should Leo Messi be considered for the MLS Landon Donovan MVP award? Let's
Hold on,
start
all right, all
with
right.
Brianna.
Hold
Let's
on.
start.
Let me put a little. Can we set the standard of what an MVP should be though? Because I have a certain thought about this, but like for example, to take it back to the NBA, the NBA MVP isn't necessarily always the best player, but the best impact to the league. So are we talking the best player that's performing, or are we talking about the league MVP that put most eyes on the league and made the most impact on the league?
I think both those are
I've
the
always
same player. So
I think I've always considered it the most valuable to like their team success. Like I've that's always how I've looked at it. It's why Mike Trout doesn't win MVP every year in MLB because yeah, Mike Trout is
they suck.
objectively the best player in baseball, but they just suck. It's like
Hmm.
that's there's a reason, and
I
also he gets is
love to
how
hear
many
it.
games. But considered, yes. Would I give it to him? No. So that like I do think he should be considered. He should be one of the top people considered. I do think he is in that conversation. I am of the belief he's missed too many games. That is fully what he's done in those games. Yes, but I'm just of the belief he has missed too many games. That is my biggest reason keeping me from voting Messi. It's just it's always been I've always felt like any player who misses that many games in MLS and MLB and NBA, I do feel like you have to be playing a majority of those games to be considered MVP. And I just feel like he's missed too many to give it to him over players who have been playing the whole season.
You mean because it doesn't have enough of an impact on the team, like on that team?
Hmm?
You mean because it doesn't have enough of an impact on that team?
I just feel like, I mean, obviously, I said this before. Like Miami can have success without Messi. Like you've seen it. It's impressive that they've been. You would think Messi's the only reason. He's far from the only reason Miami's a good team. I mean, the crew have felt it badly. Like every team in the league has felt Miami with Messi and Miami without Messi, and they're both really good teams. And I like I said, it's the thing that keeping me from it is the number of games played.
All right, Kenta, real quick. Yes
Yeah,
or no?
I don't think my thoughts are any different from Brianna's. I also think he's just not played enough. I think those parameters, right, for MLS MVP and the rest of the voting are way too low. I think the bar for like minutes, there's no real point in it, right? Like it's like less than a fourth of the season as a bar for winning all these awards, and I feel like that's just such a low bar
I
at the
mean,
point where it's like kind of disrespectful. Like, why have that bar in the first place if it's
you
only going
know,
to be
the
a
funny
fourth of the
thing is,
season?
Don Garber, he kind of treats MLS like Calvin Ball. I don't know if you're familiar with Calvin and Hobbes and Calvin Ball and how they change the rules as they go along to just make the game more interesting, to just keep things fun and wild and interesting. And it feels like Don Garber does that. He's been doing that a lot for Miami. I keep saying Miami doesn't need help. Miami is good. They don't need Don Garber to be making them,
But there was
all
no
these.
minimum before. That minimum now exists, but there was no minimum before.
Right, but why add it in the first place when it's such a low bar is my
I
point.
have no
And
idea.
regardless of that, which just has irritated me over the last
All right,
how long
Danny, this is your
that's
time to
gone on.
shine, man. Yes
But
or no, Danny?
No, of course he is the MVP. And
I want
and,
to
let me, and
know.
this is the
Before
thing.
you answer, I do want
Go
to
ahead.
ask, why did you guys get to put two players down?
I have
If
no
like
idea.
there's
I have
no if
no
there's no
idea
argument, how did Miami get to put two players on that list?
because they wanted the global news to report for both players. That's basically what I assume it is because they wanted both names to make the rounds in the news. I actually made like a full episode on this. Obviously I do an Inter Miami podcast, and I get a lot of hate because we have a lot of new viewers that are Messi fans, and I get a lot of hate because I don't obsess over Messi, I don't fanboy over Messi. I criticize Messi a lot, so I get criticized a lot. If you were to go on any of my videos and you read the comments, people just demolish me because they say I hate Messi. But that aside, I do think Messi is the MVP for a lot of reasons. Besides the fact that he's the best player, he has the most goal contributions per game, 1.8. The closest to him is 1.2 Cucho. He won the Supporter Shield, best player on the Supporter Shield. People say, oh, he didn't play enough. If he plays next week, it's 19 games. Now, for you guys from the Galaxy, Mike McGee, MVP for the Chicago Fire. He only played 22 games for the Chicago Fire. Dwayne De Rosario for, who was it? Was it DC United? Only played 18 games for them, and he won the MVP back in 2011. Now, I know that was a long time ago, but there's precedent for playing a minimum amount of games for a specific team and winning the MVP. Now, on top of that, everybody says, oh, during the summer, they showed that they could win without Messi. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody says that in the playoffs, everybody makes it. So the only teams that don't make it are absolutely horrible. Well, in that time that Messi didn't play, Inter Miami played 9 regular season games. They won 8 of those. Of those 8, 6 of those teams are non-playoff teams. They were beating up on bad teams. The first 18 games before Copa America, Messi was carrying that team. Jordi Alba missed 6 games. Diego Gomez missed 2 months. Redondo showed up in April. He played like 3 games, got injured, missed up until the summer. Like, if you look back, and obviously you guys weren't watching as close as I was, that team, everybody was worried when the summer would come around because that team looked lost whenever Messi wasn't available. So if you take the first 18 games that he did contribute before Copa America into consideration, that team would be nowhere near Supporter Shield if it wasn't for Messi. They won the Supporter Shield because of him, on top of the fact that he is the best player on the best team. And like I said, that summer thing was cute and all, but they were beating up on bad teams. Like, the only two teams that they played that were good were Columbus and Cincinnati. The Columbus one, Cucho had a one-on-one against Drake. I'm not sure how exactly Drake stopped that one-on-one chance, saved that, and then they won. They got the 3 points. And Cincinnati, they lost 6-1. Like, that summer was cute and all, but they were playing against bad competition. Messi is the MVP, hands down. And again, and this precedent, because it's happened in the past, when a player has played 18 and 22 games for a specific team and won the MVP at the end of the year.
All
So
right, Spenny, this is your time, man. What do you say, Spenny?
Let me just start off by this is a picture I took in a Clásico 2018. That is my screensaver since 2018. Lionel Messi. But no, he should not win the MVP. If you want to attack the record that they had without him, they did beat Montreal, New York, Orlando, who you guys all claim was a dark horse, Philadelphia, Columbus, Cincinnati. So those aren't necessarily
they didn't
bad
beat
teams that
Cincinnati. They didn't beat Cincinnati without Messi.
they beat them 2-0.
Without Messi?
August 25th at home.
Benny.
I'll give you a
Benny.
second.
No, yeah,
That was a
I have
game
to go
with
back.
Suarez, but that was without Messi.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
Suarez is back
it
for
was
that one.
without no, it was without Messi. I have it right here. He
Yeah, yeah,
didn't
no,
play
no, no,
that
no, you're right.
game.
That was right after League's Cup.
Yeah. I just going back to the sentiment of I don't want Miami to win for the purpose of, somebody like Messi at that stage of his career coming over and bringing his friends. I just don't think it's that valuable to the long-term success of the league. And we have certain rules in place like the DP rules that have helped this league improve in a positive way where we have a different MLS champ every year, and I don't see that flourishing as much if you just give it to somebody like Messi.
He's not giving it. He earned it.
Again, I mean to talk about like your examples with Rossi back in 2011. I think that's a different type of scenario, different league. That was, I believe, the years where we also had an actual supporter shield where you play every team multiple times, and they had key wins over all the major squads, and I believe he led the league in scoring as well. I'm not sure if they won the supporter shield that year, if it was LA Galaxy. So I don't want to consider Rossi as an example. What was your second example? I missed it.
McGee, he used to play for the
McKee,
Galaxy.
the
I believe he got
22.
traded. He got traded to DC.
No, to Chicago.
Chicago,
I'll
sorry,
talk. I can
Chicago.
talk about Mike McGee. Mike McGee began that season by completely annihilating Chicago Fire. It was like 4-1 game. He scored a hat trick, and I remember I was in the press box for that game, and everybody was like, "What the hell did Mike McGee, have? What did he do in the offseason?" Because he came back like a man on a mission. And that year, he was ended up being traded to Chicago in a pretty shocking trade to a lot of Galaxy fans, and a lot of it had to do because they were trying to find a way to get Robbie Rogers back into the league and put him in a situation where he would feel comfortable enough. I mean, at the time we didn't know what was going on, but later on we found out, hey, there's something going on with Robbie Rogers. And then later on, it turned out he was the first player to come out as openly gay. He's playing in the league, and he was going through some issues at the time. And Galaxy had to give somebody away, and they had to give away Mike McGee. Mike McGee went on to have an MVP season. So it was an
So you
interesting
kind of
situation for LA Galaxy, but in the end, Robbie Rogers turned out to be one of those important players that helped Galaxy win that cup in 2014. So it's not like Galaxy fans were saying, "Oh, we got screwed over." No, Robbie Rogers turned out to be like a really key player later on. Mike McGee is still considered a club legend, and so um, a lot of people look at his MVP as, yeah, he has such Chicago fire on it, but he began that season with LA Galaxy, and he built up to that point through his play with LA Galaxy. It wasn't like something that happened overnight. It was something that you could see that he learned a lot from playing with greats like Beckham and Robbie Keane, Landon Donovan, and so we saw Mike McGee flourish and really become something special. Um, so let's wrap this up, as I know we all got places to be, and it's getting late on the East Coast. Um, Real quick, all of you, tell me, speak your case. This is open forum. Tell me why your team is gonna win MLS Cup. Not why not. Why you're gonna lose. Tell me why your team is gonna win MLS Cup, and let's keep it short. Let's start with Brianna.
Look, like I said, I have the least amount of skin for when it comes to specific teams, but like I said, I just think they kick it up to another gear. The crew, they're able to do like they know when it's time for playoffs, and they're hungry. I know they're not happy about the Miami loss, and I think, well, for Nazi, it's just one of the best coaches in this league, and I just think he's going to be able to coach at least to an Eastern Conference final again, if not to another MLS Cup final.
Kenta.
Throughout the season, Lucho has, dealt with some injuries with his foot. He's, from what I've heard, healthy. So if he can find his MVP form, I think that's the best case you're going to have for FC Cincinnati, because he's sometimes just unstoppable. And if he can take over some of these games, then that's your best bet.
And Danny, tell us why. I mean, you've been saying it all along, but just real quick, in short, why
I think home
MLS,
field
why
advantage.
Inter Miami is going to lift the MLS Cup?
it's the home field advantage. That's what everybody wanted. We played well at home, with or without Messi. We're hard to beat here at home. So once we got the home field, I felt very confident that, I mean, obviously staying healthy is important, but if we can stay healthy, I think that we should win because we're hosting every game. And a little bit of Messi magic doesn't hurt. So I think that that's basically it. The fact that we're going to be hosting every game from here to the end.
And Spenny, you get to close it out because if our LA Galaxy is going to lift that cup, or I'm sorry, when they lift that cup, it's going to be against probably one of these three teams. Why is LA Galaxy going to win the MLS Cup, the sixth one, the race to saves? Tell us.
I think if we get the game at home, it's gonna be an atmosphere that the city's been waiting for, and that's gonna play a factor with the type of players that we have. With so much youth in the team, with the front three and Puig, I think the stadium will play a big factor in just feeding them energy. And I think the team has a lot to prove individually. Dejan Joveljic has came out saying that he wants to be the future of this team, a franchise inside of MLS. Puig already said that he wants to win titles and MVP awards. The attack is very dynamic from sideline to sideline, and if we can keep the defense solid, I don't see why that defense with this attack can't just score 3 or 4 goals on any of the Eastern Conference team that might make it to the final.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I really appreciate the fact that some of you took time out of your Sundays to be here with us. I know you all want to watch that Dodger game. As soon as we get off, you can go back to watching it. Um, but can you all please tell us where our fans can find you, starting with Danny? To mention all your socials, please.
Sure. Battered Herons on Twitter. I mean, I try to use other social medias, but basically just Twitter. Battered Herons on Twitter and YouTube. Like I said, 4 times a week, and then once in Spanish. And then Battered MLS fans. We do Tuesday nights. We do a roundtable similar to this one. We have five podcasters or content creators from across the league joining us every Tuesday night, and we just talk about basically just the whole league. So just join us, Battered MLS fans and Battered Herons, if you want to hear some Inter Miami talk.
Kenta.
Yeah, you can look up my name, or you can type in Kentra Hagatra. That's the username I use for all my socials, mainly on Twitter. You can also check us out at Area Sports Network, Area Sport Net on Twitter, and I also have a Asian football podcast that we record for Asian football, club football, and also the national team stuff. So check us out there as well.
Nice.
Very cool.
Brianna.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bree McKay, MACKAY 15. But more importantly, please go check out my work at the Dispatch, the Columbus Dispatch. Always cranking out crew coverage. They never stop, so I never get to stop writing about them. It's literally been go, go, go since the minute I got here. They're a fun team to cover, and I've been enjoying the ride of covering this team. There's a lot of great stories there, so please definitely go check out my work. And then whenever Michael A-Race wants to record the Soccer Speakeasy, he gives me a call, and we do that podcast as well. So if you want to hear some fun crew opinions, definitely check that out as well. But definitely check out the work at the Dispatch.
Spenny. Yo, Spenny.
Catch me on here whenever I get the time to be on NAG.
Yeah, thank you, man. And Chewy, thank you so much for being on the ones and twos. Where can our listeners find you? And you guys can find me as Edgar Nags on Twitter, Instagram, and you can find Nag News on Twitter, Instagram, and also look for our channel, obviously, on YouTube. I want to thank everyone again for being here tonight. We were looking forward to a very eventful final week of the season. Decision day is going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of twists and surprises. We just saw one up in that match between Vancouver and LAFC. So leave Galaxy fans sweating a little bit more. So it's going to be interesting going to Houston. It's always a very difficult situation for Galaxy fans, but hey, you love that drama, right? Once again, thank you, everybody. This has been News Across the Galaxy, and we will catch you next week. As always, keep on nagging. And for me, Wu-Tang for life, baby. Let's go.